Hello, welcome everybody, and for this next part of the 17th Appleton Space Conference. So joined just now, then hello. If you've been watching all the previous talks like me, then welcome to this next session. I think the talks today so far have been absolutely fantastic, particularly pertinent to this panel today. From what Paul Bate mentioned right at the start, I thought was really interesting, and even right through to the different areas such as looking at climate change and even manufacturing things in space. There's a common theme, and it's around international collaboration. And this session is titled "Going Global: A Discussion Panel on International Space Collaboration, Innovation and Trade." I'm Robert Elliott. I'm Head of Business Development at RAL Space. I work here at the UK's National Space Laboratory, and obviously the organisers of the event today. And we're very much, my role is very much to support access to the expertise, skills, technology and facilities that are here at RAL Space across industry and academia. And today I'm joined by a very prestigious panel, and I would let them introduce themselves. So first of all, without further ado, over to you, Carol.
Thanks, Rob, and good afternoon, everyone. So I work within the AI and Data Economy division at Innovate UK. So by way of a quick overview, Innovate funds and supports UK-based business-led innovation for commercialisation and scale up, and this is for a wide range of sectors. Innovate sits within UKRI and also helps bring businesses together with research organisations and academia. Innovate will help deliver the government's recent UK innovation strategy and has just published its own 3-year action plan. This is intended to help enable the UK become a global innovation hub by 2035. Some key aims include helping UK businesses to grow through innovation and enabling a greater emphasis on global opportunities. A key component of the plan is collaboration, both within the UK ecosystem and internationally. So this aligns well with the National Space Strategy and also this panel, which is very well timed to discuss the combined opportunities.
Thanks very much, Carol. And over to you, Charlie.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for the very kind introduction. I'm not sure I'd describe myself as prestigious, but anyway, my name's Charlie Hare, and I am the International Relations Lead within the UK Space Agency. I'm not going to introduce the agency because I think our new Chief Exec did a very good job of that this morning, but briefly to introduce my team, we lead the key international partnerships for the agency, so that's with other space agencies and partners. My specific focus is the oversight of the Asia or Indo-Pacific region and also the Middle East region. But I also have a specific country lead with Japan, and looking forward to this discussion. Thanks, Rob.
That's great. Thanks, Charlie. And Josh.
Thanks, Rob. So, hi everyone. I'm the Deputy Head of Space at the Department for International Trade. So we're the department responsible for our export and inward investment work, as well as overseeing the UK's export controls regime and making sure that we secure the right investment into the right parts of the UK economy. So my team sits across many parts of the department's work. Our primary aims are to help UK space companies export to our target markets and enable inward investment into the space sector. So as the department's sector experts in space, we work closely with regards to the space sector on exports and inward investment, as well as investment security, export controls, free trade agreement negotiations, bringing down market access and trade barriers. We work with our defence colleagues, given the dual use nature of space, we help grow, we help with the capital growth of the sector, so attracting capital investment into UK space companies. We also work very closely on the clean growth agenda. So for DIT, that green, clean growth is very important and featuring in a lot of our work. And we're also a key conduit into our international trade ministers. So we have four priority regions that we focus on in both exports and inward investments. They are North America, Europe, with a particular focus on the typical bigger economies, the Gulf, where we're seeing a lot of emerging interest, and the Indo-Pacific, again, with a few priority markets within that. I'll stop there for now. Thanks, Rob.
All right, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Josh. And finally, Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Olivier. I've spent 35 years working in the upstream space industry, or predominantly upstream space industry. My roles have ranged from engineering to business leadership, and I've worked probably, last time I counted, about 10, maybe more international space missions, which all achieve sort of world-class outcomes. I'm currently the managing director of operations for Arqit, which is the sort of cyber space and quantum pioneer, and recently listed on the NASDAQ as a unicorn, a company worth more than $1 billion at listing. I'm also a non-executive director for two small companies, Spaceforge, who presented earlier, and another one called Icomat that's attracting a lot of interest from around the globe for its sort of pioneering carbon fiber production technology, which produces lightweighting. I should also add I'm a member of STFC's council, so if anyone ever feels the need to contact me because they feel STFC should be doing more, I'm open to those approaches. Thank you.
That's great. No, thanks a lot, Ben. And I should say to our audience as well, it's brilliant that we've got this panel together, and quite often everybody's extremely busy and running around and obviously floating companies and things like that, and so it's a great opportunity to ask these people questions. So please do use that Q&A function. We'll try and get through as much as we can at the end. So yes, I mean, without further ado, I mean, what I wanted to talk about, again, in the context of this international space collaboration, innovation and trade, there's obviously a huge opportunity. Paul was talking about it at the start. It'd be definitely difficult to do a panel such as this without mentioning the B word. And I think that definitely reshaped many people and companies thinking about how to or not to expand their business or their research area, and operate in new regions, markets, and kind of get access to new customers and users around the world. With that backdrop of leaving the EU and dealing with a lot of the changes it's brought. And then, of course, on top of that, we've got a global pandemic going on as well, which we should also mention. And despite all that, the space sector, the UK space sector and the global space sector is booming. And I think as a quick observation as well, I think hopefully we are coming out of a period where there could be more sort of physical activity, fingers crossed. I think it feels like in business and the space sector, there's this sort of general reset, and now we're all thinking, what are our plans going to be in 2022? We need to really go big on this. Everybody's going to be talking to everybody and trying to grow their business. I mean, Morgan Stanley just last year, for instance, predicted that the global space industry could generate revenue of over $1 trillion by 2040. And it's nice actually that they look that far ahead as well. So that it's a stable sector, and it's not just scientific wonderment and endeavor and pioneering R&D that we see all the time, and that gives me great hope about the sector. But it makes good business sense to be in the space sector. One thing in particular as well, there we had a launch of a space strategy. I don't know if you can see it. It doesn't really work very well on my funny screen. But that was launched a few weeks ago. It's unsurprising, I guess, when you read that many of the pillars talk about international collaboration, cooperation, innovation as well. And it's a key delivery mechanism for delivering this national space strategy. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And this is what I wanted to start a discussion on here about how are we going to work together to make this happen. And I mean, Charlie, perhaps you could kick us off with on this and give us some further insight into what is meant in the strategy. Where are the focus areas, and what should we be looking at as an industry or a whole UK ecosystem? Over to you, Charlie.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I think I can probably answer this question in two parts. I think one is sort of where we are now, and one maybe looking into the future under the strategy lens. And I'd make it clear that I can probably only answer from the UK Space Agency sort of international relationships point of view. But I couldn't start this sort of question without talking about the strong relationships internationally that we've already developed through the European Space Agency. I think that's well documented, that the approach and also the fact that the Space Agency's significant chunk of funding goes towards that in the past and in the present and also in the future. So that's where I'll start. My focus is developing the relationships outside of the European Space Agency, though, but also mention that there are a huge amount of collaboration and engagement that we do as an agency with a multitude of countries across different programs as well. But really the area I'm looking at is that strategic relationships with certain countries, which we've been building and developing over the last few years through different bilateral and multilateral initiatives. And the way we've focused on our priorities historically has been aligning to higher level government policy and direction. And you mentioned some of that a second ago, and there's been a recent integrated review. So there's a bit of a shift towards looking at the Indo-Pacific region. And of course, we're driven by market opportunity as well. We have within the agency signed a number of formal agreements with our priority countries. I can give you a few examples. US, we've signed the Artemis Accords, Japan, Canada, Australia, and there are also some in the pipeline. We don't see those agreements as necessarily measurements of success, but they're certainly the building blocks for developing that future growth. But we have kicked off a few initiatives as well underneath those agreements. The Australia-UK Space Bridge is one of those agreements, and that might get touched upon later in the discussion, but we're underneath that agreement. We've had a recent funding call, DIT Export Academy, and there's also been a regional roadshow as well, highlighting key strengths of both Australia and UK regional areas, and also we a couple of years ago kicked off the National Space Innovation Programme dedicated international funding arm, and that supported a number of projects in these focused country areas, and we've taken on board that there are lessons to learn through our work over the last few years, and I guess that kind of is a good segue into point two, looking at the future and underneath the lens of the National Space Strategy, and as you mentioned, Rob, collaborating internationally is one of the core pillars across the strategy. I don't think we can do anything in space without collaborating internationally, and I think one of the other core things that I've taken out of the strategy is forge the best relationships. So we heard from my chief exec earlier that there's a huge amount of international opportunity, and we do need to focus the space agency's efforts on bringing the most value, and it's also quite well documented in the strategy the types of areas that we're looking to develop. So the key now is to ensure we build those best relationships to deliver these capabilities for the UK, and I think we're in a good position now. I think we've got, as I mentioned, the building blocks, and as we see in the strategy, there's 4 phases towards the end of the strategy, and I think we're quite well set to deliver on the phase 2, which is the ignition phase, and that's enhancing bilateral partnerships. Another thing that was mentioned earlier this morning from Rebecca from Bayes was that the National Space Strategy sets out that high level ambition. I think they're now working on that implementation phase, and we are certainly working closely with our colleagues in BEIS on the country priorities. Josh mentioned some earlier. I've mentioned some already. I'm hoping they don't change considerably, and you know, there's some really good evidence reasons as to why we're following up with those particular countries, and some work still to come. The other thing that Rebecca mentioned was the multi-year settlement, which I think is a real positive, and certainly from discussions with industry, that's one thing that I think will be really well accepted. The outcomes are still unknown around the comprehensive spending review, so I'm not going to forecast what programs and how much we have, but certainly from lessons learned from the NSIP International, as I mentioned, closer consultation with the sector, I think, is going to be key in the build up to any of these programs, especially international ones. But what I can commit to, I think, for the shorter term is continuing on the good momentum from the strategy announcement. Is we are aiming to go bigger at events, and certainly with yourselves, Rob, at the Space Symposium, and also the International Astronautical Congress, we're planning to increase our show at those, or increase our presence at those shows, which should be good. And then I think I'll probably finish up on one point, which is a good example of how we can work in the future, and it's a Singapore mission that's coming up in February, bringing together Innovate UK, STFC RAL Space, DIT, High Commission Singapore, and I think that's a really good model how government can support industry academia going forwards in this joined up approach. I'm not going to go into the detail about it now, because I'd imagine Carol might want to a bit later on. But I hope that's quite an interesting scene setter of where we are now, and hopefully where we want to move to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, some really good points there. I'm quite intrigued. Be interesting to see what how you implement the international partnerships element of the innovation program in future. I think there'll be a lot of keen interest in that. I mean, just over to Ben then. I mean, how do you think, from what Charlie was saying, and the strategy itself, how does that feed into your business decisions on an international level? How does it benefit you, or if at all? It'd be interesting to get your thoughts.
First of all, it's welcome as a positive and reasonably assertive statement of intent about how we want to go out about our business internationally. I do think, though, if you look at the one thing that I can see in the sense of maturing space industry that we have is, whilst we have all this innovation and startups, you see companies like Arqit, which styles itself as a cyber, quantum and space company, or SpaceForge, which is a materials technology, both companies that use space to achieve things that are not directly selling a spacecraft or selling space data. And I think in the space strategy has to address, when we approach people internationally, how we broaden across those. So do we sell semiconductors into Singapore? Do we have security arrangements with allies that are promoted by the space strategy? I don't think, my view is, whilst there is a sort of space on its own, let's do things collaboratively, perhaps the more mature commercial model is becoming the use of space and the deployment of the benefits of space into a wider range of markets. And I think trade missions should not exclude those kind of contacts, or trade initiatives should not exclude those kind of contacts. And certainly from past experience, I've seen, in days gone by, when BAE was a big space player, it's come back again, which is good news. That could be another B word, but it's a good news for the industry, I think. Then you see someone who operates across a number of sectors that can help project what's going on in the space industry into international trade arenas.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. I mean, just to open it up to Josh and Carol. I mean, have you got any other thoughts on that? Just quickly, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So just to really build on what both Charlie and Ben have said, and in terms of business innovation, and at an organisation level, I would agree certainly with Ben's point there about looking beyond the space sector. And I think there is an opportunity also for innovation partnerships to go beyond the traditional definition of the space sector. And that might relate, for instance, to a number of the downstream vertical sectors and also other enabling technologies. So, for example, sort of innovation partnerships in areas around AI and robotics, or perhaps developments within sectors such as agriculture, maritime, and other transport sectors, etc. And also just to add that, the concept of this sort of sector integration type of partnership also relates to the increasing opportunities for integration with terrestrial data and systems.
Yeah, I was thinking of that as well, and also the actually is one of the comments or questions we had about what actually counts. If we think about space collaboration, what actually counts as a space company or a space organization? How do you get companies as diverse as possible that fit the scope, fit into the space box, or does it even, or maybe we need to think about it in a different way. Maybe we'll come back to that at the end. Maybe if I move on, back to you, Carol. I think actually it'd be really good to kind of understand what Innovate UK are currently doing on the international stage in supporting businesses to scale. It's something that I've constantly heard, certainly even in the Harwell ecosystem, but across the UK ecosystem. We're great at amazing ideas, really disruptive technologies. Sometimes we're not, the UK that isn't so well at keeping hold of these things and scaling up to to be the next big multinational. So perhaps you could give us about how you're supporting companies on that journey, and academics for that matter as well.
Yeah, sure. So just very briefly, and just to sort of really stress the point, we do recognise that there is a huge source of capabilities and innovation within the UK. And the UK has many comparative strengths on the world stage. But I should say there is also that opportunity for UK organisations to enhance and accelerate that innovation, as we've been saying, with international partners that have complementary strengths. And I'd like to stress the word complementary in this context, both at an organisation level, because it's important for us as a UK strategically. And so we need to be smart about our collaborations in terms of the long-term capability building aspect. And in terms of the space sector more specifically, the UK has a strong heritage and some world-leading strengths, but it is an inherently global sector and developing very quickly on a global stage. So we're starting to witness some very significant and strategic international joint ventures involving organisations, as we say, sort of beyond the traditional space sector. So there's a significant opportunity to build and grow those space capabilities. And this can be really helped, I think, by smart innovation collaboration. But to answer your question about what support Innovate offers in this respect, there are international programs that we have across a range of sectors, and these programs have progressive levels. So that's from scoping and exploratory visits to industry visits. And these industry visits fund and enable UK SMEs to make connections for innovation collaboration in particular countries. So depending on the specific scope, the visits can be for developments at various technology readiness levels. In some cases, there are also bilateral R&D budgets, for example. Where there isn't an R&D budget, the UK business interest may be really for closer to market development partnerships and for test beds and demonstration opportunities, for example. But all developments are intended to lead to commercialisation ultimately and wider international sales for both partners. So an example of the potential outcome here is shown, I think, by a satellite applications company that participated in an Innovate Agritech visit to Australia in 2020. So the company is Deep Planet, and they apply Earth observation data for precision viticulture. Now, the connections from the visit led the company to collaborate with research institutions and top wine producers to co-develop innovative product features and demonstrate their technology. So this has led then to sales in a range of countries as well as Australia. And the company's also just announced the opening of a subsidiary office in Adelaide. So international expansion with it. So this type of development also demonstrates the opportunity for, for us as UK government organisations to closely coordinate our support. And as Charlie's mentioned, this is exactly what we're doing on the upcoming Singapore visit. And this is an industry visit for 15 UK SMEs planned for February. So the reason really for Singapore was, although it is a sort of a country that has a nascent space sector, albeit with strong ambitions for growth, we do see it offering the UK a number of attractive and complementary capabilities. Singapore is known for driving technology advancements, it's world leading in digital developments, and it's pioneering the concept of the smart city. It hosts major progressive transport and logistics hubs, and is aiming also to become the world's first smart nation. So as such, it presents a range of opportunities for innovation, particularly in the application of satellite technology and also for test beds and trial centres. So, and just as another way of example, a partnership that shows interesting potential, although I should stress it wasn't enabled through Innovate, but that is one of the partnership of Satixfy UK with OneWeb and the Singapore Technology Engineering Company. And this relates to the development of a new in-flight connectivity terminal to deliver Wi-Fi on aircraft via OneWeb and geostationary satellite networks. And this is being commercialized through Civil Aviation Networks. So just to come back then to Singapore and the visit that we're looking at, Singapore also hosts the Global Space and Technology Convention, which attracts attendees, COVID notwithstanding, from the wider Asia Pacific region. And, Singapore is said to be the east-west bridge for the space sector. So the visit coincides with this particular event and is an opportunity for regional connections as well. So this visit, I should mention, follows on from the one you, Rob and Charlie, organised in 2020. So I think on this note, I'll hand back to you, Rob, to perhaps talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, back in 2020, we organised a visit. It was about how do we combine our joint skills and expertise and experience of working internationally to do something to support industry and academia in developing international partnerships. And we had there were some fantastic outcomes from it. A UK pavilion at GSTC. We had about 18 companies, over 20 participants come from the UK and join Singapore people. We had a workshop attended by about 65, 70 people from both the UK and Singapore. And actually a lot of the outcomes from it, varied from UK companies getting contracts in Singapore right through to companies actually recognizing the similarities that they had and the value in forming joint ventures and partnerships and growing their sales channels, across UK and Singapore to enter new markets. So I think it was really successful, and I really hope that we do many more of these sorts of things. And it's again how it felt like we were really sort of building on something, solid foundation for international partnership. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from these experiences. So thank you. I mean, over to you, Josh. I mean, it'd be great to hear about DIT working in the space area now and what the focus is. I know certainly in the past couple of years, we've seen the space team reduced in size, and then it seems to have got real sort of fervour and real interest going on in your team. So perhaps you could talk us through what the focus points are at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And just echoing a lot of the points that have already been made. Having come from the UK Space Agency to head up the space team in the Department for International Trade, I know how valuable that cross-government, cross-organisational working is. And you're right that DIT has had a bit of a up and down relationship with space in the past several years, in terms of resourcing and in terms of its priority within the department. But I think over the last 18 months to 2 years in particular, we've seen, as with the rest of government, we've seen space really rocket. I mean, that's a terrible pun. Rocket up the priorities of DIT, and now we've got a nearly full team. We're continuing to recruit, so we're continuing to grow that capability within the department to work with all parts of the department, whether that's on supporting UK SMEs, secure funding and secure capital investments, or all the way through to helping some of the UK's leading large companies and primes overcome significant market barriers in India, for example. So we've got a wealth of experience working across the breadth of the UK space sector, on helping those companies grow within the UK and grow internationally. We also have seen a real boom in international investors coming to the UK and looking to establish a presence here, so that they can work with UK companies. They can take advantage of the world leading facilities and the RAL space, or that are found at RAL space or are found across the country at Westcott or up in Scotland. We've seen such strong interest, and so DIT working exceptionally closely with Charlie's team and the rest of the UK Space Agency, with Carol and Innovate UK and you, Rob, in RAL Space, and others across government, is so important. And there are certain partnerships that really comes into play with. So the UK Australia Space Bridge is a really good example of where you've got multiple government departments coming together in a whole of government approach. That one of the unique aspects of the Space Bridge was that it sits across both civil and military interests, and that was really one of the first kind of arrangements that the UK entered into on space, because we're starting to recognise that the opportunities for not just UK SMEs but companies across the spectrum, those opportunities do sit across both civil and defence, because of space's dual use nature. And I just wanted to pick up on a couple of other points that people have already raised in terms of how we do support those companies in accessing those opportunities overseas. So I think Ben made the point that what we would traditionally think of as a space company aren't typically space companies, and actually their services and all their products are best sold into non-space markets. And that was certainly one of the aspects of the Space Sector Exports Academy. That was a real focus of that upskilling program in helping SMEs in particular from across the UK in understand how do they sell into non-space markets, and how do they take advantage of the interest in space-enabled services in other sectors. We've also got an army. We've got a lot of international trade advisors across the country who that is their bread and butter. Very few of them are space specific. They understand that space can feed into many other sectors because they cover those other sectors. So they're really at the coalface of taking space applications and services and selling them into other countries around the world and other non-space sectors. So we're trying to do that even more, and we work really closely with multiple organisations across government, UK Space Agency first and foremost, in refining that message of how space can support agritech, how it can support transport, how it can support the development of smart cities in Singapore or in the Gulf, in the UAE or Saudi Arabia, where we know they've got huge ambitions and are looking to the UK for some of that expertise and that capability that we do have in the sector. So there's a lot going on, and as DIT and a lot of other government departments start to ramp up even more so their support for the space sector, there's only more that we need to do, and more join up that we can do in order to enable that support for the sector.
Okay, thanks a lot, Josh. Yeah, really interesting. Lots of thought provoking. I mean, Charlie, have you got, or Ben, have you got something to add to that?
I've got one thing, if I can, Rob.
Yeah.
And I think it's something Josh would probably back me up on this. So for us in the space agency, we don't have staff based overseas. So if you look at our some other countries in Europe or US or Japan, they have international staff from their agencies based across the globe. Now we rely on colleagues from DIT and FCDO internationally, and there is a vast international network for companies, academia to pull on when they need to. So if you're new to exporting and want to dip your toes in the water, there's a lot of support in market to pull on. And then sort of on the flip side of that, I know when I've been across on some international missions as well, there's quite a lot of high level support from high commissioners and ambassadors who, whenever you mention space, they're normally quite keen to jump on the bandwagon and get involved, and can be very useful for opening some doors internationally. So it's not all about the support that we give you in the UK. I think there's a really fantastic global network, and I think one of the sort of repeating factors of this discussion is how us from government side can continue to ensure that works better. And I think some of the changes that have been made recently across government should really aid that, and hopefully have that strong UK government contingent support for the sector going forward.
Okay, brilliant. I think I wanted to move on because we're having some fantastic questions coming in, and if anybody does have any more questions, please do keep them coming. It's quite a wave of them, but we'll try and answer some of them. But I did want to ask, kind of Ben, finally, again, I'm really intrigued by the journey that Arqit have taken so far, and the unicorn nature, and how. Because my experience on international, activities has really been supporting kind of the smaller end of the SME, who are trying to maybe in stage 1, stage 2 investment, and they get a huge amount of benefit. So how do we kind of help work with you? Do you still need support from the likes of STFC and Innovate and DIT working together? What's the how do we work together or internationally to get the best outcome for companies that are in your position?
I think it's a good question, and it sort of follows on from the comments just made. I mean, just to start by saying, Arqit has been very grateful for the support they've had from the UK Space Agency and for Innovate in developing the proposition and building the business that led us to go for a public listing. I think that it's a question of maturity and where you are. And I think, one of the things I would say, and it's related to export, is when I started my career in the industry, and British Aerospace was a big, system integrator, aircraft seller. And there was a trope there that, if your own government won't buy it, then no one else will. I think you do find a case where, you might be going to Singapore, and space is a strategic tool for many governments. It has it allows them to do many things. And I think if you are not, if your first experience as an SME is trying to sell to a foreign government, then that's quite a high wall to scale. And also, if your technology is so good, why aren't your own government buying it? So, I've faced that in other businesses than Arqit. And I think, we haven't had a national program in space of any significant level. The last big Skynet program was a PPP. I think the key challenge really is to help SMEs or any company that has an innovative proposition, hone its proposition in the home market as well, in some shape or form. And I think that's what government could do. I'm not specifically talking about Arqit. And I think the challenge is when you're working in ESA. ESA does an excellent job in many dimensions, but of course they are aggregating contributions from across the member states to produce space missions, and that sometimes rules people out or makes the time before getting your opportunity to prove what you can do on an ESA mission a long time. So I would like to see government as an intelligent customer of, or an intelligent sponsor of space. It doesn't have to throw huge amounts of money in, but it needs a sort of I use the word agency, not with a big A, but with a smaller, an agency in and urgency in assimilating these products, showing what they can, why they are beneficial and how they are beneficial, because that will be the basis of many of the initial customers overseas before they spread out into corporations and other buyers. So that would be that's what I would like to see better developed, shall we say. I think Innovate and the innovation projects and those things do their job quite effectively, but then you have to commercialize the product. And we made a decision in Arqit, we took a strategy in Arqit to get very much towards customers. But that was that was a big investment for us as well. And most businesses, you have to have a certain amount of capital to front that up.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Ben. And I think what we're seeing here is there's all this incredible sense of depth of knowledge and experience right across all these different parts of the UK. We've got the UK different parts of the UK space ecosystem here. And we need to sort of slice a bit off everybody and put it all together and to get the best outcomes. In some ways, actually, it brings to mind the National Space Partnership, actually, that brings together key stakeholders across the industry, academia, and government institutes and government itself to tackle some of these issues right across science, innovation, including the Space Academic Network, which is a big part of the space programme, but BAIS and the UK Space Agency, and many of the UK, and to look at things like trade, innovation, and regulation as well. That's another, I think, key aspect where you need this kind of joined up mentality, and actually it fits quite well with what's in the UK space strategy when it says it wants to bring the whole UK. We've got to bring the whole UK ecosystem with us, on trying to develop these international cooperations, and I think all of us here, see that our roles, a key part in delivering that, especially at places like RAL Space, we're a national lab, so we're working in the national interest, right? So I think it's fascinating, and I think it feels, as the space strategy suggests, I guess maybe we're just starting to get into this, and it's a very competitive world out there in terms of trying to attract and grow investment. But we have some great minds and expertise that to build solid foundations on. I was thinking as well, while everybody was talking, that as well as supporting businesses and academics, through their technology readiness levels, throughout this, we've always come up with this new kind of innovation readiness level idea, where there's different levels of support that you can provide all the way, through to full internationalization and product ready. So anyway, I think we've got 15 minutes left. I think it's a great time to have a look at some of the questions. So perhaps I can start somewhere towards as I scroll through. I mean, Chris Lee had a couple of questions at the start. He was really interested about how Innovate UK sees innovation to be focused towards data and technology rather than sector specific, and possibly joined up with that is, how do we define a UK space sector? So there's a couple of questions there. in terms of expert support. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Carol? But maybe perhaps more on the the strategy that Innovate UK has in terms of the focus on data and technologies.
Yeah, so sure. I think it's a good point in terms of, and I think it builds on what we've been saying about looking beyond the space sector as it's sort of traditionally defined. Certainly, data is one of those big potential areas for using and integrating space data. But a key point is to say that a lot of the solutions will need integration with terrestrial data as well. So we are seeing that AI is beginning to unlock this potential of space data, and it makes it much more economically viable as well in terms of the provision of these solutions. So I could speak at length about this, but I don't want to take up all the time. So I'd be very happy to have a sort of further conversation offline if anyone would like to discuss this in more depth. I notice there's a few other questions, but I'll let Rob field those.
Okay, yeah. I think another good point that Chris made, and something that I'm really passionate about as well, is that Paul Bate actually reminded us that investment in academia is actually equally important for economic growth. And I saw a brilliant report actually about the economic return that you get off international science missions, and those impact reports are exactly the sort of thing that I was hoping to see, that I always believed in but I'd never seen written down. So I mean, perhaps to you, Charlie, how do you think academics are going to play a greater role in export and the wider knowledge? Because at the end of the day, this is about knowledge economy, and the knowledge economy is what's going to get us out of all our mess. So how is that going to work going forward?
Yeah, I can touch upon my experience of this, and I'd start with saying hello to Chris Lee. Nice to see his name popping up again. He was the chap that brought me into the agency, so I've got to be nice. I think my experience of working with academia has been fantastic, and working with the Space Academic Network. We held a series of workshops when we were setting up the Space Bridge negotiations, and my word, I've never seen a Teams chat go off as much as it did with the academic network. It was phenomenal, the appetite, and it kind of did make me stand back and go, oh, maybe we should be doing more. And I think that's progressed into the fact that one of our pillars underneath the Space Bridge is exactly that. It's research and education. So we have a dedicated work stream under the Space Bridge to try and bring in some more academic cooperation. And I think there's potentially going to be, and maybe not an announcement, but some movement on some collaboration directly with Australian academics coming up in the near future. So yeah, it is definitely a vital point, and one that we need to consider in our key relationships. My personal one is with JAXA in Japan, and JAXA have got a phenomenal research base, and I'm very, very keen for some of our academics to engage. So trying to now set up the structure to enable that to happen moving forward.
Okay, brilliant. Another question. I thought it was really interesting from Luke. Is there any framework in place relating to import duties on goods arriving from space? So it's easy to regulate going from country to country, but what if it's coming back from space? So or is it I guess we've got a free trade agreement with space at the moment.
I'm assuming that might be one for me, and I'd be interested in Ben's view on this, especially given his role with Space Forge, and that is the example that I've used previously to try and answer this question. So it is something that DIT is working with, is genuinely working with
Really?
The UK Space Agency to kind of bottom out how would this work. because, for example, with Space Forge, if there are materials or products that are sent into space as one thing and therefore classed as an export from the UK, or technically from wherever it's launched, and then is transformed into something else in space and returns as a different product in a different place on Earth, and then we have to return it to the UK, you could end up navigating something like 3 or 4 different trading arrangements between the UK and various other partners. So it is something that we have started discussions with UK Space Agency, and particularly regulatory policy folk that are working with the SCDO at the UN level, because this is not going to be just a bilateral trade arrangement challenge, but something that will probably have to be addressed at the UN level, at the WTO, so the World Trading Organization level as well. But given that's not something that's historically been too much of an issue, and given all the other priorities going on in space at the moment, it is up there, because it is going to start happening. But I think it's early days at the moment. So it's a complicated picture at the moment, and yeah, DIT working with the Space Agency, working with the SCDO, we are trying to look into it and trying to work out what the future of such activity would look like. But I don't know if Ben's got thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, let me say I'm very encouraged to hear that you're actively addressing it. I think, when we look at new services and new opportunities in space, the regulatory environment and the fact that it is an international, territory, shall we say, or is one where you do have to seek agreement. But I think it is also an opportunity. I think in the UK we have, well-developed regulatory approaches. We are, our legal system is the basis for, a third of the world. So, I think we can lead in this area. What I don't want us to do is be in a position where different departments of government pass the sort of too difficult bucket to each other and don't do anything about it. And I think that would be the big hindrance. So without wishing to sound a bit, aggressive, I do want government to get on the front foot with this. And I think that is really what government should be doing in terms of creating the conditions where people will prosper. And then I think that will probably do more for inward investment than pure cash, because that's the sort of thing you can't buy. If we can lead on those kind of enabling arrangements, then I think that makes a big difference to business, because the regulatory risk is always a large one. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's good to bring in that element actually to this discussion. Catherine Courtney asked a brilliant question actually, and I'll open this up entirely, to the panel. She thinks, just obviously space science and inspiration is not enough. We'll have new international leads within the BEIS space strategy team shortly. How do businesses and organizations, how do we recommend that those stakeholders engage with the various people with international in their job titles across BEIS, UKSA, DIT, and also SCDO? I mean, I guess it's for a new entrant in particular, or startup, it's probably staggeringly complicated to know where the front door is. But I mean, my own thought is where you go to DIT, right? And because they've got they're the international guys, But could you confirm that's the case, Josh? Maybe, or
Yeah. So that would always be my advice. We know that this is something that's been raised by the sector, that there's particularly for new entrants into the UK market, there's who is the front door, and we're an excellent place to start. But what we have to do is then work extremely closely with everyone across government. Hopefully it's not a surprise to anyone, because I have said it in a public forum before, that DIT is trying to establish a cross-government process led by us, but supported and integral to the work of UK Space Agency, BEIS, the research institutions, the Ministry of Defence as well, to establish a new process to streamline that triaging and that support deployment of new entrants into the UK space market. So People will be aware that there is an ongoing restructure of how central government governs and works on the space sector, and so we are trying to implement this new inward investment process as part of that. That will be continue to be led by the Department for International Trade.
Yeah.
We have dozens of people working on inward investments that provide really granular hands-on advice on finding the right facilities. So they have a checklist of dozens of requirements that they ask companies to fill out, so that they can then go do a site search across the whole UK for those on behalf of those companies, and then working with the space agency, recommend where they think is the best location for those companies to locate, help them navigate tax regimes, for example. So we've got these experts ready and willing to help these companies entering the UK. But as I say, it is genuinely a cross-government effort and cross-organisational effort. But in the first instance, DIT, given it international trade is in our department's title, is always a good place to start.
Very good. And I also like even from my side, sometimes people wonder why, I'm sort of involved in all this international stuff. And, I think there's a role for places like RAL Space, because they are involved in so many international missions, which generally kind of come from the scientific base, from academics, collaboration. We're building the instrument, we're working, across the international boundaries to develop technologies. And in the case of Singapore, we have the Spectre, which is the space-based quantum experimental test bed to test quantum keys over international spanning distances. And I really wanted to use that money that we were given from BEIS and in collaboration with Singapore to really leverage those scientific partnerships and get the economic impact out of them, and then hosting workshops out there to bring more of industry and engage. I think that was a really useful way of leveraging some of the academic scientific partnerships and sort of layering on these different bits, and hopefully that can actually sort of chuck a lot of the activity over the fence to Innovate UK and the Satellite Applications Catapult and DIT, as it converts more from a scientific endeavor through to a commercial product. And I can imagine sort of waving goodbye to a few of these things, as more a greater expertise sort of take them up. And I think that's the nice thing about this panel, is that we've got this whole, from the way I look at it, this whole potential journey that we can go on from a a scientific idea, through to a technology, through to innovation partnerships, and then finally through to what Ben's company has done, through to floating it on the stock market, all in the space of a couple of years. So I think there's a huge opportunity and optimism, I think. And I think it was Isaac Newton, wasn't it, that said, if I have seen further, it's standing on the shoulder of giants. And it's often used a lot for scientific progress, but I certainly think in the context of this going global, it's about saying to companies and academics, use what's there, build upon what we've done already, and you'll get an advantage and a head start over your competitors, basically. And I think that's a great way to start building up on the enormous work that's already been done. I mean, we've got about 40 seconds, maybe any one more word from anybody.
I'll just finish with closing down one of the last question, I think, which was about the 10% target.
Yeah.
Which I think was, a great target, using classic government speak to galvanise the sector, but also under pressure from other external influences like currency fluctuations and size of market growth, etc. We heard Rebecca Evenden from BEIS talking earlier about setting a new set of metrics, and I think this will be certainly on the next agenda item for government to come up with a new set of clear metrics. And I know from the space agency, Paul talked about this catalysing catalysing total investment into the UK sector. And I think for us that might be one of our key metrics.
Yeah.
So that's something that's next on the radar, I would imagine.
Okay, well, we're completely run out of time. Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Ben. It's been absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Some really interesting thoughts. Thank you so much for all the questions and comments. Really appreciate that. So other than that, have a safe and happy December and 2022 if I don't see you. And really looking forward to the NASA chief scientist come on just after. So thank you very much. Bye.